And I called Linda up and I said, Linda, this is the worst covered field in all of style. I mean, we have, we have accessories people, we have fashion people, we have shoe people, we have everything. But plastic surgery is such a fabulous field, and you can't appreciate it until you've had it. And I want it. Give it to me. She said, it's yours. Take it. Do what you want. Okay. And so that's how I became the expert on plastic surgery.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Technology of Beauty, where I have the chance to interview the movers and shakers of the aesthetics business, the beauty industry. And today is no exception, because today I get to interview the queen of aesthetic surgery, the queen of plastic surgery. She's a former editor of Allure for over 25 years, I think. She also was a beauty editor at the Wall Street Journal. And now she makes movies in the beauty business, and we're going to hear about her last movie and also her upcoming movie today. This is Joan Kron, the one and only Joan Kron. We've been personal friends for many years, and she's been a part of the aesthetics industry forever, as long as I can possibly remember. She's in New York today, and we're on a Zoom call. She's in her place in New York where I've been before, and as I mentioned, a true confession, we are dear friends, but I have another confession. She's actually my girlfriend. Sorry, Erin. Joan's been my girlfriend for so many years. Joan, welcome to the Technology of Beauty.
Oh, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So
Gosh,
there
I'm
are some
following in so many fabulous, in the footsteps of so many fabulous people.
Well, thank you. No one has been on the program like Joan Kron. So, Joan, would you please tell our listeners and our watchers a little bit about you, a little bit about where you came from and your background before we get to the Wall Street Journal, Allure, and your film business. So, go ahead.
Oh, let's see. Well, I'm born and raised in New York, but and I was the career that I started out to have was a theatrical costume designer, and I was at Yale Drama School for 3 years in a master's degree program in costume design, and at that point, everybody knew that I wanted to design the circus parade, and I got a call from the costume designer of the circus parade, Miles White, and he said, I need an assistant, and you've been recommended. And I said, oh, I'd love to, but I have to tell you, I'm getting married in 2 months, and I'm moving to Philadelphia, and this was 1950. And in 1950, it took 2.5 hours to go from New York to Philadelphia on the train.
Oh, my word.
So that's how old I am. I'm 93 years old, I should say that.
You're
and
wonderful.
So I did not take the job, and I regretted it, but then I've had this fantastic career, so it didn't matter. So I went to Philadelphia, and we got fired from the Mummers Parade. Because I wouldn't put sparkles on my sketches, and so I had to do something else. And I helped. Then I was an interior designer, and I helped one of my clients start something called the Arts Council of the YMHA. And then I became a big deal in that, and we brought all kinds of avant-garde programming to Philadelphia. And I, of course, knew Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein, and I was involved in pop art, and I produced limited edition art objects and whatnot. And after almost 10 years with the Arts Council, I asked for a desk and a phone because by then I was the chairman. And they said, only the paid workers get a desk and a phone. And so I said, I quit. And I had no idea what I would do, but then somebody came to me, some boys, young men came to me who were starting an underground newspaper and asked me to be the society editor. And they said because I knew everybody in society and everybody in the underground. And so I said, well, I can't write. And they said, well, everybody can write. And by then I was 40 years old, 41. And my girlfriend, who I was in business with doing limited editions, which are in museums now, she was growing marijuana in her backyard. And so I said, well, that sounds like a good item for a society editor to cover that party. And so I covered that. And the story eventually landed in Philadelphia Magazine. That was one of the early city magazines. And when the editor said that he wanted to publish it, I said, well, I'll go to journalism school. And he said, oh, don't do that. You're a natural, and I'm going to teach you everything you need to know. And that's what happened. I worked there for 3 years. And meanwhile, I was married to a doctor, which is very important, because at first I ran his office, where we had a big townhouse in Philadelphia, and I ran his office and I read medical economics every week. So I knew a lot about the business. And then he was very philanthropic, and he wanted to be a medical missionary, and he volunteered on Project Hope, the hospital ship, and I went on several tours of duty with him. And some of your people in the Aesthetic Society were involved in Project Hope too. And unfortunately, in 1968, we were in Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, and we had our children with us. And my daughter got a sinus infection and died in 4 days on the Hope ship. Oh, and so that's when I had all that time in the 60s, I had been working in at the Arts Council as a volunteer, bringing really crazy avant-garde things to Philadelphia, which was a very straight-laced city. And that's when those young men came to me and said, you know, would you do this writing? And I was so despondent. I thought, well, maybe this will pull me out of my depression. And of course, I started writing for Philadelphia Magazine, and it wasn't long before I was divorced and moved back to New York, left the doctor, and married my high school sweetheart. Who I met. I mean, really, this is who I met again at my 25th high school reunion.
I love it.
And we both left our spouses, and yes, and I was quite a scandal. And then I was trying to get work as a writer because meanwhile I was commuting to Philadelphia. Okay, fast forward. I got my dream job at New York Magazine as a design reporter under Clay Felker, who was the famous editor of New York Magazine, who founded it. And from there, I was stolen away by the New York Times, and I started the home section at the New York Times. And but at the same time, I was writing a book, because I always have a project. I can't help it. I always have a side project. So I was writing a book with Susie Slesson, another reporter, and it became, the name of it became High Tech. Now, I'm credited, Susie and I are credited in the Oxford English Dictionary for popularizing a very little used term called high tech. And we called it high tech. And the minute the book came out, the term high tech sped around the world. And I actually mentioned by name in the Oxford English Dictionary. I'm very proud of that.
Yes, I can hear. That's fantastic.
Okay. So I went to the New York Times, but I was writing high tech. And after I was there a year, I asked for leave of absence to finish the book, and they wouldn't give me a leave of absence. They said, oh, you see, Joan, everybody in this newsroom is writing a book. If I give you a leave, I have to give everybody a leave, blah, blah, blah. So I said, well, I quit, so there I was quitting again.
Uh-huh.
So I have a habit of that too.
It sounds like it.
Okay, then I wrote another book about the psychology of decorating called Home Psych. And I caught the attention of the Wall Street Journal, and they hired me. By then, I said I didn't want to write design. I wanted to write fashion. And the Wall Street Journal hired me as their first fashion reporter. And
what year was that? What year did you start the Wall Street?
That was about 1984.
Okay.
And I spent 2 years there, and then I was stolen away by Avenue magazine, which was a magazine for the rich and famous in New York City, the glitterati, and I became the editor of Avenue for 4 years, and I had a column in Avenue called Ms. Faux Pas, which was all about the bad manners of rich people, and of course I got to know Donald Trump very well. He said, "You mentioned me more than you mentioned anybody else," because he had more bad manners. But anyway, then it came. That was I was there from '86 to 1990. And now I had written High Tech, Home Psych, and Miss Faux Pas. And I turned Miss Faux Pas into a book, of course. So I quit Avenue. And at that point, Allure was just starting. And Linda Wells was having a hard time starting a magazine because everybody said, how much can you say about lipstick? And somebody introduced me to Linda, and I said, "Oh my God, you can say so much about lipstick. You can say so much about beauty. It's never been covered properly, and please hire me." And so I was hired to cover the psychology of beauty because I had written Home Psych was about the psychology of decorating, and I had met so many sociologists and quoted them, and I said there's a lot of overlapping research. And so I started out, and probably I met you around that time. It was around 1990, 1991, I think. The magazine was our first issue, and I was out in Hollywood doing a story about, I think, Hollywood beauty or Hollywood style or something like that. And I was at a plastic surgery recovery house, and while I was there with a photographer and a limousine, because in those days, Condé Nast really spent the money, and they gave us everything we needed to cover a story. And I said, we're in the recovery house, and suddenly they said, everybody has to go into the living room. Hurry up. There's an emergency. And somebody was having a complication in the recovering from a facelift. And in Los Angeles, when you have an emergency, the fire department comes. And so several fire engines arrived, and all the clanking of the boots and everything. We heard all this. We couldn't see it, and we just knew that something bad was happening. I think maybe somebody was bleeding from her stitches or whatever. And I turned to the photographer and I said, "Not me ever." Okay, fast forward.
Yeah, right.
To another year.
I've heard that before.
Right. Okay. Fast forward, we had what are called ideas meetings. In the beginning they were every week, and then every month and whatnot. So, and I go with a long list of ideas and whatnot. And Linda comes in and she has an idea. She said, "I want to do a story about plastic surgery, and I want to see if plastic surgeons talk patients into surgery. And I found a writer to do it, and I've assigned it." So I had read the Harvard Business Review had told you how to be a better employee. And then it said, you shouldn't disagree with your boss in front of everybody. You should take the boss aside. And so I didn't say anything at the meeting. And after the meeting, I went in and I said, Linda, I'm the oldest person here. I'm over 60. And you've assigned somebody who's 35. And I don't think that's the right person to write this story. So she said, well, I'm not going to cancel it, but you try it. You can try it. So in about 10 minutes, I had the names of the 4 top plastic surgeons, or four of the best plastic surgeons in New York, because I had very good contacts. Always have a good Rolodex. And I made appointments, and I said, of course, I have no interest in having plastic surgery.
At the time.
I was married to a surgeon, and I've seen a lot of surgery, but that's not for me. And I still had a little bit of my face left when I was 60. So I went to all these appointments, and as I'm doing it, I'm learning about plastic surgery because I'm asking, I'm going from one doctor to another. And I went to the first doctor, and he was Jackie Kennedy's doctor. But there was so many things that happened to me in his office. There was no coat closet. There was no privacy when talking to the receptionist. And then when I finally got into his office and I saw him, and he stood me in front of a little wash basin and a little tiny medicine cabinet mirror. And he holds my face up like this, and he says, oh my God, you haven't seen your chin in years. and then he says, and you're going to have to stop smoking. I said, didn't you read what I wrote when I came here? I answered the questions. I stopped smoking 30 years ago. And so I wrote this up like a letter to my best friend. And when Linda read it, she said, oh, this is fabulous. And she told the other woman, she called her off. And it was my story, and it became shopping for a new face.
And were you masquerading as a patient? Were you masquerading as a patient?
I wasn't masquerading. I was coming in as a patient.
Okay. Not as a reporter. I had to
fill out the form, and I said, what is your occupation? And I said, journalist. And I brought my husband along, and of course I said to him, I'm not interested in this, and he said, I hope not. And when I got to the 4th doctor, I suddenly impulsively, you know what happens, when you go to see the plastic surgeon. He talks to you, and then he or she sends you to the booker, or the lady who
patient
books the
coordinator
surgery and whatnot. Yes, the patient coordinator. Okay, and I said, I think I'd like to sign up for this. And my husband said, what are you doing? And I said, I think I need this. and then, he said, oh, this is your caper, Joan, which meant he didn't want to pay for it.
Yes.
I said, Allure wouldn't pay for it. That was agreed. I knew that from the beginning, and they would pay for the consultations, but not for surgery. So I said, well, I have some money I've saved, and I'll pay for it myself. And so then everybody tried to talk me out of it. You could die. Yep. You could look really strange. I mean, the girls at the magazine were calling me in. Why are you doing this, Joan? No, you're so pretty, blah, blah. I said, talk to me when you're 60, okay? So I wrote it up, and there was plenty to say about, how I was treated and whatnot. And I decided, I had a book agent by then, and she said she had a facelift and she loved it. She said, but don't sign your name to it, dear. So I said, you don't need this on your, it won't be good for you. This was in 1990, 3 or 2 or 3, something like that. And you don't want to be connected with that. So I was anonymous, and they did illustrations instead of photography of me. And because of that, I named the doctors W, X, Y, and Z, because I didn't think it was fair to be anonymous and to mention their names when I was saying some negative things about their hangers in their coat closet.
Right. Well,
and other things. So when the story came out, I had already had the facelift because I was afraid I would die, of course. And I said, don't publish it until I'm fine. But as I'm recovering, I'm taking Polaroids every day. And I'm saying, oh, my God, this is so fabulous. And I called Linda up and I said, Linda, this is the worst covered field in all of style. I mean, we have, we have accessories people, we have fashion people, we have shoe people, we have everything. But plastic surgery is such a fabulous field, and you can't appreciate it until you've had it. And I want it. Give it to me. She said, it's yours. Take it. Do what you want. Okay. And so that's how I became the expert on plastic surgery. But I didn't know much, but I had been married to a surgeon for 20 years, a general surgeon, and I'd watched everything from appendicitis to heart surgery because my husband used to help Charlie Bailey. He was one of the earliest heart surgeons in Philadelphia, and he didn't have anybody to help him. So my husband and his partner used to scrub in on his operations. Mm-hmm. So my son would go and take the pictures when they're operating on heart surgery, and I'm watching. And of course, it's very hard to watch heart surgery, but I by then I was pretty good at watching surgery because I thought you ought to know what your husband does. I mean, how can you be married to a surgeon and never have seen an operation? Because you have to understand that. So at the same time, I was still dealing with the grief, and I became an expert on death and dying. And I had a side specialty where I was writing stories on death and dying, and I wrote what was considered the best story on the girl in the coma, who had lost consciousness and was a vegetable, basically, and but the hospital wouldn't let her be detached from the ventilator. And so I covered every aspect of death and dying. I covered surgery, a suicide. I covered cancer patients. I covered children, parents who were dealing with children who had cancer and who were going to die. And so I became quite an expert in a kind of a psychological field. And that was very helpful to me in covering plastic surgery because I had a lot of empathy, and I understood what it's like to feel threatened in your health. And I think one of the biggest fears in plastic surgery is that people express to me, and what I felt, and it would be so embarrassing to die on the operating table. But, the second story I wrote about plastic, the first story I wrote was about my facelift, but the second story I wrote was called Death by Facelift. And I again was in Hollywood. I was in California, and I was visiting a plastic surgeon's office. And the secretary said to me, you know, we had a death in this town last month. And I said, oh my gosh, really? And I got on the phone with Linda and I said, could I cover this? You know, could I get the resources? Would you let me stay here or whatever? Get me the limousine. And so I covered this case, and then I was still friendly with my ex-husband, the surgeon, mm-hmm. and I called him up because we had a son that we were always talking about his future and whatnot. And I said, Sam, guess what? I'm now a medical reporter. And now I'm covering a case where someone died of plastic surgery. And he said, Joan, I didn't want to tell you, but you know that woman who died. And you were having your plastic surgery, and I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to worry you. He was a very sweet guy. Uh-huh. Anyway, so yes, and because I had that access, I found out. I said, "Oh my God, Marilyn! Oh gosh, yes, I remember Marilyn. Oh yes, she moved to California. Oh yes, she wanted to be an actress. Oh yes. Oh my goodness. Whoa! Before you knew it, I knew I knew Marilyn's roommate. I knew the doctor. I knew everything. I'm not mentioning any names here. No. And it was when that story ran. I mean, that's when I became the queen of plastic surgery, because it was very interesting. She was having her surgery filmed for her 65th birthday. And so I was able to get the film. Oh my. And I was able to play it. I wouldn't watch it myself because I didn't feel that I would know anything. I wanted to find out what happened. And what happened was she didn't die from the surgery. She died from an asthma attack right at the end when they were removing the
tube.
What do you call it?
The tube.
You know, the airway.
The endotracheal tube.
Right, the trach, right. Mm-hmm. And at that point, her throat closed up. And because of my access, I found out that she had never told the doctor that she had asthma. She did not tell the nurse anesthetist that she was having an attack of asthma while she was waiting for surgery. She didn't tell the anesthetist that she was on depression pills, and all these things, of course, and all of this helped me become a better reporter, because I was finding out the things that I needed to warn my readers. I call them my patients, my readers, and because Linda had a rule: we could never write about something if we didn't say the risks.
Okay.
And so, am I boring you?
Not at all. This is interesting, because now let's get to Allure magazine. How did you possibly then jump from there to Allure? I mean,
that's when Linda took me to lunch when she was just doing the dummy of Allure magazine, and she was having all these negative comments about what could you say about beauty. Uh-huh. And I said, well, I know a lot about sociology, and I know where to find the papers on sociology of beauty. I think I can, bring you some psychology stories, some sociology stories, and because of my writing about death and dying for those years, I had very good contacts in what I call the ologist business. Uh-huh. I know a lot of anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists, whatnot. So I was able to bring a lot of resources to the magazine very quickly they gave me a column called Scalpel News. And that was all about covering what was new. And so in Scalpel News, I would cover, right then at the beginning of the 90s and all through the 1990s and the aughts, with all the development in lasers, injectables, um, devices. What's, the biggest things today were all started when I started at Allure. So I was there at the right time.
Right.
But the benefit that I had, Grant, was that, I don't know if you remember, but when you had a plastic surgery meeting, somebody, maybe you or somebody who was the head of the communications committee. There was always a communications committee among the surgeons. And they would, Peter Fedor or Foad would come in and they would call a press conference. Now you call a press conference, and you write to all the fashion magazines. And there were no beauty magazines, it was only Allure. And every fashion magazine had one page of beauty at that point. Then the editor would send her assistant. Her assistant was right out of college. She was 22 years old, and she fainted at the sight of blood. Okay. So the doctors from ASAP's come into this press conference. It's always at a hotel, in a room in a hotel. And we're all sitting at our little tables. And then they have the slides. And then they're showing us before and after and during slides, Yep. And when they get to during, all the fashion assistants put their heads down on the table and say, I can't watch this.
But you did.
Said, I can watch it.
Right. So when was your first meeting at the Aesthetic Society, the American Society for Aesthetic Plastic Surgery? Do you recall when your first meeting was and where?
I don't remember the first one. It was probably at the Marriott or the Hilton. But once I went to a meeting, I realized this was something I had to cover regularly, and then became a regular.
I saw you every year. I would see you at every single meeting.
And they would save me a seat up front because, of course, I'm getting older and my hearing is not great. And I'd say, I can't hear. I always have a special problem.
And didn't the society give you a special award?
Oh, I won so many awards. Oh, my goodness. And then there was the twin study. Remember the twin study?
Sure. I was talking about it this week to my fellows. I absolutely remember the twin study.
So the twin study, there were 4 doctors. They were doing 2 sets of twins. Mm-hmm. And of course, when I got wind of that, I decided that I would stay extra days at the meeting because this was going to take place. The surgery would take place after the meeting. The annual meeting was over and the doctors were all staying and doing the surgery.
I want to elaborate I want to make it clear to everybody. So the 4 doctors had 4 techniques on these 2 sets of twins, and then they were to be followed every year and then brought back to the meeting every 5 years and so forth. So we could follow them and evaluate the different techniques on these identical twins. So go ahead.
Right. Okay. So I interview each of the doctors, and then I want to talk to the twins, but they won't let me. So I call up Nancy Kobus, who was that time was working for Elizabeth, who married one of your surgeons, who was the head of the communications. Mm-hmm. And Nancy was dealing with the reporters.
Yep.
And Nancy and I were good friends, and she was very helpful. And so I called her up and I said, look, Nancy, how would you feel if I tried to find the twins? She said, let me ask Elizabeth. So she asked Elizabeth, and she comes back and she says, you'll never be able to find them, so be our guest. You want to try and find them? You'll never find them.
Oh my.
I said, okay. So I found them in about 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And this was before the internet.
No, because Sam Hamra was one of the doctors.
Yes.
And in his interview with me, he had identified the twins as stewardesses on a certain airline. Mm-hmm. So I called the airline and I said, do you have any twins?
Sure.
Oh, we've got 6 sets of twins. I said, well, they should be this age. Oh, we have 1 set that's the age. I said, would you give them a message? Allure magazine is trying to reach them. Okay, we'll give them the message. Okay, in 10 minutes,
Your phone rang.
one of the twins calls me, and I get the interview. Well, then the twins tell their doctor, Dr. Dan Baker, who's also one of the doctors. Yep. And Dan Baker says, how did she figure that out? She must have read my notes upside down on my desk when she came to interview me. Now, he calls Linda in Paris and says, Joan Kron has no ethics. She's read my notes upside down on my desk. How else could she possibly have found the twin?
Did you set him straight?
No. They banned me from the meeting. They said they're banning me from the scientific sessions. So I said to Linda, I'm banned from the meeting. I think I'll go. So I went and I spent the meeting in the press office because I'm not banned from the press office. I just can't go to the scientific sessions. Mm-hmm. And everybody by now, all the doctors know that I'm there, and doctors are rushing in that when they're giving the 1-year report at this meeting, and I'm in the press room, and all my friends among the doctors are coming into the press room during, while these presentations by the 4 doctors are going on, because they're very competitive and they each think their technique is best, whatnot. And they want to help me, and they're telling me, this Dan Baker said this, and Sam Palmer said that, and Ramirez said this, and who was the 4th one?
Sherelle.
No, it wasn't Sherelle.
Osley.
No, it was. I said Ramirez already. Oh, Owsley. Yes,
no, Owsley. It was Owsley. John Owsley.
Jack Owsley.
Yeah.
Right. And so now everybody's still mad at me, and they're all saying terrible things to me that night at the cocktail party, whatnot. And my story comes out, and it's not bad. It's a good story. And after that, every time they made a presentation at every meeting, and then they called me up and they're begging me to cover it.
Of course they did. You put us on the map. Me. Absolutely. Let's jump to your film career, because you were there at Allure for 25 years, if I'm not mistaken. And then you took a little time off, and then I remember you came out. I can remember some different interviews you did with me, but I remember when you started your first film. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and go ahead and share with us, what age did you begin? At what age were you when you started as a film career? You were a director, a writer.
I was in my maybe 83, 84.
Mm-hmm. I think that's amazing. You morphed again.
Young. I was young then.
Yes.
The way I started was that I had been at a press conference for the Aesthetic Society, and at the press conference there was a film crew, and they were filming the society, for whatever reason, because they were going to incorporate it into a movie, a documentary that was being made. Mm-hmm. And when I came to the meeting, I know this because the producer just became a good friend eventually, and she said that I came up to the desk and I said, where's my name tag? And they said they didn't have a name tag. I said, oh, well, I don't bother because everybody knows who I am. And I went into the meeting, and then the producer was standing at the table, and I said this, and she said, who is that? And they said, oh, that's Joan Kron from Allure. And then she came after me and she said, oh, I hear that you know a lot about this. Can we talk to you? And eventually I became a talking head in this movie, and it was called Youth Knows No Pain. And it was about the filmmaker herself was the daughter of a plastic surgeon, and she was going through, the film was about her ambivalence about plastic surgery, her memories of her father. It was very personal, but it also involved some people who were very extreme cases. One guy who wanted to look like Jack Nicholson, and one woman who, spent all of the family money on repeated surgery. I mean, so it was a personal story, but it was also what a lot of people in the earlier days loved to look at. It's what I call, the stories are called Ain't It Awful? Mm-hmm. Ain't it awful what people will do to themselves? Ain't it awful what doctors will do to them? I mean, everything was critical. So I had a very, very small role. And when I saw the movie at Lincoln Center, it was finally bought by HBO and ran at Lincoln Center. And my friend Susie, who wrote High Tech with me, her parents had started the film festival. That got nothing to do with this, but anyway, she always takes me along with her. She has tickets. And we see this film, and I just turn to her and I say, I could do that. After the movie, I could do that. Oh, is that a movie? Mm-hmm. I could do that.
So that's when you started with your first movie, right? And what was the name of your first movie?
My first movie is Take My Nose, Please.
Right. I
was talking to my cousin, Bill Sheft, who wrote the monologues for David Letterman. Mm-hmm. And he and his wife were both comedians, stand-up comedians. And they came to visit me one day. I think I had knee surgery, and they came over to visit me. And I'm trying to entertain them, you know me, and to tell them some good stories. And I said, the only people who are honest about surgery are comedians. And Bill knew I wanted to make a movie and that I was having trouble, getting just the right subject. And he said, Joan, that's your movie. I said, oh, you're right. And I went to my computer, and I typed, Take My Nose, Please. Because Take My Wife, Please is the most famous punchline in American comedy. Ah. And everybody knows it, and no matter who you say it to, if they're American, they know it and they laugh. So that was it. And then, of course, nobody wanted to invest in it because I had people who were regular investors in documentaries, women, and we had a pitch party, and they came and they said, and we had a sizzle reel, and oh yes, and I had an editor for the film. I hired an editor for the film, Nancy Novak, and yesterday it came out that a film that she edited is on the list of the Academy Awards this year. That's for the great. Academy, all in the Stacey Abrams movie about the voter suppression that she edited. I'm so proud because Nancy, I took a chance on Nancy, and I mean, I knew she'd be great when I hired her, but I mean, she wasn't like the name that everybody comes up with. Now she is. Anyway, so nobody wanted to invest. This woman came to the party and she said, if I invest in your movie, everybody will think I had a nose job. And I did, and I've never told anybody. And I can't do that. And then I sat next to an important professor, a woman professor from NYU film program. And she said, your sizzle reel is very good. She said, but I would never help you because I don't approve of plastic surgery. Really? So that's what you're dealing with when you're making movies about plastic surgery. You're dealing with all their feelings, their taboos, their shame. And that's why it's the most fantastic subject. And that's why I never run out of ideas.
Yeah. Try being a plastic surgeon.
Right.
Now,
So
tell me about
anyway,
your most
just
recent film. Tell me about your Botox film. No one knows about it. Oh, okay.
Show you. They said I couldn't win a prize. They said I couldn't get into a film festival. I was too old. A first movie never makes it. This was my first movie, my first film festival, the Miami Film Festival. I won $10,000 and the special achievement documentary achievement award.
Congratulations.
And then I went on to win more awards at festivals and a great deal of respect. And now I have producing partners who like to take my nose please so much that I'm a partner. They're partnering on my next film, which is the history of Botox. It's wrong. The history of botulinum toxin.
Right.
And, nobody knows what botulinum toxin is. So as a shorthand, I say the history of Botox.
Right.
But it's the history of botulinum toxin, and it's called Weapon of Beauty. And it's going to have a lot of animation, and it's very unusual, and it's not a typical documentary. And I can't tell you too much about it, but all I can tell you is it's out of the box thinking.
When can we see it? When can we watch the movie?
As well as very precise historically. And I have, scientists, and I've been to all the toxin factories, but there's a great history behind botulinum toxin, and I know a great deal about it. I've been thinking about it for 10 years. I was going to write a book about it, but I decided to make a movie instead.
And when will we be able to see the movie?
I hope in a year. Right now we're looking for backing. We have backing we have very serious investors who invested in the sizzle reel, and now we're showing the sizzle reel to all the top streaming companies, and there's interest. And the problem is that animation is very expensive, and it's not fully animated. It's not a cartoon. Mm-hmm. But animation is not always cartoons. People have a misunderstanding about animation, but it's very helpful when people are dead or no longer here. It's very useful to use animation.
Sure.
To recreate some scenes or whatever. And so I can't tell you too much about that. All I can tell you is it's educational, entertaining, informative, gossipy. It's everything you want in a movie. Just like Take My Nose Please is.
Yes. Well, I can't wait. And if any
you've seen Take My Nose Please.
Yes, I have.
That's on Hulu, it's on Amazon Prime Video.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Joan, for being on our program. It's been very entertaining and very instructional. I can't wait to see your next movie and hear about the history of Botox, or botulinum toxin, but Botox. And I can't wait to see you, hopefully at the next Aesthetic Society meeting or at Cosmetic Boot Camp this summer in Aspen.
If you're going, I guess I'm going.
Fabulous. I can't wait to see you. Aaron and I are going, and
that would be fun.
Let's go to dinner. So I want to thank all of you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
For listening.
You're very welcome, Joan. It's been a pleasure. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us here at the Technology of Beauty, where I have the opportunity to interview the movers and shakers of the beauty business, of the aesthetic business. And today was no exception with the one and only Joan Kron. Thank you, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Stay safe.